Well, hello there, and welcome to Elder Scrolls Spotlight, a podcast about role players and role playing in the Elder Scrolls Online MMO-RPG. This is a surprise, last-minute quick edit to the episode, which is why it's being shelled out a lot later than I announced and intended. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to all of you that listened to episode 0. I honestly did not expect such a level of views and positivity from the community. Thank you guys so much. Secondly, I'd like to say thank you to the constructive feedback I've received, both in PMs and comments in the video, and the comments in the threads in which I posted episode 0 on. Guys, I read you loud and clear. I'll drop the amateur voice acting and the vocal fry, and try to talk like a normal person. But it won't be immediate because, well, a few episodes have been done already, and I'm pretty sure I screwed up and did it in those episodes. But I do read all your comments, and I'm glad a dumpster fire hasn't started yet. One last item I'd like to address is an apology. I'm sorry, folks, but the episode quality for this one isn't as good as I'd like it to be. There are stutters in the audio and hiccup blanks here and there, which I apologize for. It's a disservice to my guest, and it's a disservice to you all. I will work on trying to figure out how to sidestep these failings in the future, but as I said, it may take a while. Audio editing is a royal bitch. With that being said, my name is Mikey, and I'll be your friendly neighborhood commentator for the evening. Tonight on our show, our very first installment, our inaugural journey, our premiere chapter, our pilot episode, whatever other term you can mean for the first of many, I am joined by someone who, in my mind, stands as a lasting influence on the roleplay community. His first RP experience was on forums, where he crossed over many different mediums and many different fandoms. His first MMO-RP experience was in World of Warcraft, where he was active during the Burning Crusade and the Wrath of the Lich King expansions. In ESO-RP, he was one of the principal driving forces behind the Tales from the Second Era's plot series. Plot involving first Morrowind, then Skyrim, and finally Black Marsh. In Tales of the Second Era Morrowind, dubbed the Ashlander War, Housemer and Ashlander fought each other in a series of bitter, unforgiving battles over the false Nerevarine. In Tales from the Second Era Skyrim, he played an Imperial sorcerer who, with his army of Reachmen, nearly stole the voice from the Greybeards. In the finale, Tales of the Second Era Black Marsh, he and his guild, the Banescale Fellowship, got involved with many others in a twisted plot to prevent rogue histories and Proto-Argonians from enslaving the minds of innocent people. He is also known for many of his multimedia projects as well. Working tirelessly as the administrator on RPHQ, he and many others under his banner have provided priceless resources to DMs and RPers everywhere. On the RPHQ YouTube channel, you can find engaging videos such as Roleplay, where he interviewed the lore master himself, Lawrence Schick, and Role-Playing in MMOs, A Beginner's Guide, the latter of which is perhaps the most important contribution to the community, in my opinion. Nevertheless, I'm sure he was intoxicated, inebriated, or high when he said yes to coming on. But I'll stop brown-nosing now and begin the conversation. Floyd, God help you, but welcome to the show, dude. How you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm super stoked. I love your concept for this. I think it's going to be really cool.
You say that now, but let's get into it. Where are you from, dude? And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking? I'm curious about you.
I was born in Texas, but I've lived in Montana pretty much my whole life. And
Okay.
I'm 6 years old.
I wouldn't have guessed, to be honest. You sound real young, like, in all honesty. How'd you get into video games?
Well, the first video game I ever saw was Doom, at my friend's house when I was like 4 years old or something like that. And I was, fascinated. And my mom wouldn't let me play it because it was too bloody. But I saw like Mario after that and Sonic, and I think the first game I ever owned was Mech Warrior. And yeah, it just kind of rolled downhill from there.
Okay. I cut you off like an asshole. What were you saying before? People always what?
I was just gonna say, people when they see me, they think I'm older. When they hear me, they think I'm younger. I think it's the beard.
You have a glorious beard, don't you? Viking beards. So how'd you get into MMOs? How'd you get into MMOs? How did RP come to you as well? Where'd that start?
Well, I mean, I didn't really call it roleplay, but I played lots of imagination games when I was a kid, like into middle school. Way after everybody else was done running around pretending that they were swinging around lightsabers. I had no shame. And when my friends and I would play on the playground, I would be the DM most of the time. We didn't know that that's what it was called, but that's what we were doing. I played all the NPCs. I just had the plot line, and my friends reacted, and that was our role play.
So you mean to tell me ever since you were a wee lad, you were GMing? You were a storyteller, as they say.
I
A
suppose,
revered role. I am envious of you, sir.
but as far as actual role playing, if you want to call it that, I started with forum role play, and then I was on a forum with some friends, and one of them said, "Oh my gosh, you have to try role playing in World of Warcraft," and so I did.
You did, and that's all she wrote. Can you remember any of the forums that you RP'd on? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I was really active in this one called Moonwolves. I don't know if you know Moriel from ESO.
I'm afraid I don't, but I will now look her up and maybe bring her on the show.
Yeah, you definitely should. She was a host in the ESO-RP podcast, but we role played together in the Moonwolves, and it was literally wolf role play, like you're role playing as a four-legged wolf.
Okay, so you were a furry. I'm kidding.
They weren't on two legs. That's the difference. But
So, Moonwolves, anything else?
well, I started forum roleplay on the Neopets forums. So if you didn't think I was a
Okay. Well, I started RP on Sonic the Hedgehog, so we're kind of
right on. I was into Sonic for way too long, so I can totally relate.
Do you ever look back at what you did in the forum RP, just cringe a little?
Oh, so much cringe. I compare myself to China sometimes.
Are there any fond memories though that you have from Moonwolves or Neopets?
Oh man, so many. I let's see. So many. I mean, my first character was really terrible. He was a wolf with a velociraptor claw because I thought that was cool.
Okay. What was his name?
His name was Tio Amen, which is just something I pulled out of my ass.
Okay.
It was super cringy, but I had really good times. Actually, it was on the Moonwolves that I did kind of my first large-scale roleplay plot where I had my wolves' long-lost brother come, and he had a pack of mangy desert wolves with him, and they fought this big war, and there was a map and everything, and territory was gained and lost, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I guess that kind of laid the groundwork for some stuff that I did later.
Well, let me ask the most important question. Did people have fun?
Oh, absolutely. We all had a blast.
Then there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody on that website probably looks back at it and cringes.
So, what about the RP in World of Warcraft? Obviously, it must have been not a whole new world, but something similar, I would imagine.
Oh man, it was incredible. I mean, it was. I had played EverQuest, but not role played, and I had followed Star Wars Galaxies, but I was still in either middle school or early high school at the time. I think middle school, and my parents wouldn't pay the Star Wars Galaxies subscription, so they bought me the game. They found out there was a subscription, and then they got me a different birthday present instead. And so, like, I had always imagined, man, what would it be like to be like a merchant in Mos Eisley or something? And so I had the concept of it in my mind, but when I actually like got into an MMO and started role playing, it's everything that I think we all still love about MMO role play. It's an entire world full of other people all playing in the same, giant imagination game.
And you led a guild there, didn't you?
I did.
Would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, it was the Bane Paw Fellowship, kind of the precursor to the Bane Scale Fellowship in ESO. It was a Tauren group, and I think the original concept was it wasn't specifically Tauren, but there were lots of Tauren in it. And the idea was that it was a Horde group that was trying to bring the Horde together and eliminate racism.
I can feel the rage of many Horde RPers cry out.
Yeah, it was interesting because, like, my character that ran it was a little bit racist against undead. So it was complex, and I think that's the thing that I really liked about it, because the Horde is so mix-matched, and that made it interesting to have all these like tribal interactions and to like try to earn the trust of these trolls from the Zandalari and all kinds of stuff.
So how long did you stay in WoW for?
I started right at the beginning of Burning Crusade, right when it came out, and I left about halfway through Cataclysm.
¿Por qué?
Let's see, what was the reason I left? I think I just kind of got busy with real life stuff. I started kind of beginning a career working with dogs, and I started role playing in other ways, mostly like tabletop and stuff. And also, I think I had just done everything that I wanted to do with my characters.
So then what led you to ESO, or ESO, excuse me?
I had a friend, a really good friend of mine, and he said, hey, that game that you've been talking about that would be the perfect game for role players that you're always imagining? And I said, yeah. And he said, it's coming out. It's called The Elder Scrolls Online. I was a little bit into The Elder Scrolls. I had played a lot of Morrowind back in the day, but I hadn't played anything since then. And I heard that was coming out, and I was like, oh man, I think I feel the MMO itch coming, and I just obsessively played Oblivion and Skyrim until it came out.
Did ESO live up to your standards as a game?
I would say for the most part, the roleplay community surpassed my standards. It was, the most amazing roleplay community ever that I've ever seen.
Psst. Hey guys, he's saying he loves you.
Yes, I love you guys, for real. Like, I've been across many other roleplay communities since then, and it's still, I consider it my home. But there were certain things I was expecting out of it that didn't happen, and I think this was the same for most people. I really wanted Skyrim Online, and I knew that it wouldn't exactly be that. I knew the combat would be more MMO-y, and that didn't bother me. What bothered me is that the questing was so linear. I really wanted to feel like you can just go anywhere and run off in any direction, and now you can do that, but at the time when it came out, it was not that way, and I was a little bit disappointed by that.
Well, okay, let's break that down, because from a person like me who's been playing since last December, I have no idea what that's like. So give me an example. What was that like exactly?
Well, I mean, it was...
traditional MMO quest.
Yeah, it was traditional MMO questing, with certainly some really cool new things that they did. Like, they've done lots of stuff with the choices that you make that other games haven't done. But it was very much like, you go to this place, and then you go to this place, and then you go to this place, and I like the story, and I had a blast questing, but I didn't feel quite that sense of like awe that you get in a single-player Elder Scrolls game.
From the way it sounds, like it was an okay MMO, but not an okay Elder Scrolls game. That's kind of what I'm getting from you.
I mean, I would say it was the best MMO and an okay Elder Scrolls game.
Okay, all right. We come now to the subject that who's probably going to be meat and potatoes, but RPing in ESO, right? You've been there since its prenatal stages, I would venture to say, haven't you?
Yeah, I was posting articles on ESO-RP.com in like September 2013 and before that.
Back in ye old times,
Before the game even came out.
we didn't even have one Tamriel when I was your age. We had to make character doubles. But okay, what were these articles about? Or articles?
I wrote about why people roleplay. I wrote about a topic that's still very near and dear to me, which is travel roleplay. I wrote about suspending your disbelief that the world is a lot bigger than it seems like in the game, because there's supposedly like millions of people living in wherever Daggerfall, and yet you can cross it in 20 minutes. So like, and every now and then a portal is convenient for OOC reasons, but I love travel roleplay, and I love feeling like things are far away.
Well, let's break that down. Exactly. What is travel roleplay in what sense? Define that for us.
Well, I guess for me, it encompasses having your character exist at a certain place at a certain time. Like, if there's like a really cool event that I want to go to in Skyrim and I'm in Black Marsh, I'll say, okay, I went to the Mages Guild and I used their portal. But otherwise, like, that's, you don't just use the Mages Guild's portal. There has to be a good reason for it. And not everybody can just whip one out without expending a lot of energy, magicka and resources. And so the idea is kind of that your character has to go from one place to the next place to the next place. You don't just hop around the map. And for me, that's like the most fun that I've had in a lot of role play is making an adventure of something. Like, hey, we need to talk to this person and they're all the way over here. What's going to happen on the way?
I can imagine, you would have to make that up yourself, wouldn't you?
Yeah, if you have somebody who's going to DM for you, who's going to like play as the environment, that's always fun. Or you just say, oh shit, Ashlanders are coming,
It's mighty simplistic that way. Tell me about a time where you really had fun with travel roleplay.
Oh man. So with the Banescale Fellowship, we did this fantastic, we ended up referring to it as the Land Stride. I think that's it's either an actual Argonian term or we made it up. I can't remember now, but essentially, the guild was going to Skyrim to seek out tribal people in Skyrim, because the Banescale Fellowship was conceived as a sort of a confederacy of tribes within the Ebonheart Pact. To ensure that tribal people had their, continue living their traditional ways, and we didn't have any Nords, and so we decided in character, okay, we're going to go up to Skyrim and we're going to find them. And it was so much fun. It took like 3 weeks for us to get there, longer in character. And we stopped at every town, we stopped at every tavern, we met so many role players. It was great, People would see us along the way and come with us for a while. We picked up like 4 new guild members on the way and had like subplots happening along the way, and it was
Did you make these up as you were going along, or how'd that happen?
Yeah, the subplots kind of came up as they went along, and like we had an Ashlander, an exiled Ashlander who was in the guild, and his clan came and challenged him in front of us and stuff, and that was just him, doing his role play, and it was all stuff like that. So it was very spontaneous. We had ideas of what we were going to do once we got to Skyrim, but along the way, we just did what felt right.
I like that because you gave it a sense of organic. I shouldn't say chemistry, but a sense of organicness as you were going along, weren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the great thing about MMO roleplay is that you are going along and you're actually going to run into people, and what they do affects your journey.
See, that can also be a double-edged sword now, couldn't it?
Yeah, oh, definitely. But luckily, we only had good experiences, and I would say I've mostly had good experiences with the people in ESO.
Okay, we skipped over a few steps, but that's okay. I want to back up a little bit because you had one character already on ESO, didn't you? Utek Jaw? What's it? Tell us about him.
Utek Jaw was conceived of before the game came out. My idea behind him was to play a character that everybody trusts. Not everybody, but a lot of people trust, and becomes a respected member of the community, and then seemingly betrays everyone. And originally,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, I mean, it's super dastardly. And like, originally I was like, okay, and he's going to be super, super evil. And then as I played him, I was like, well, maybe he's not super evil. Maybe he's just misunderstood.
I do think that you've committed a sin there. The blaring of ICOC lines. Floyd, is that what happened?
I mean, I'm sure it did, because I just like fell in love with him.
How could you? Your own... No, I'm kidding.
You know, characters evolve, and like,
sure.
My idea evolved, and I think the way that I ended up playing it out was a lot more interesting than, oh, actually, he's just really evil and screwed everyone over.
So, what's his backstory?
He was a slave in Morrowind. He was hatched in Blackmarsh. Obviously, we're talking about an Argonian. Hatched in Blackmarsh.
I thought he was Khajiit.
Hey, Khajiit come from eggs too, you know.
Okay. Really?
Yeah, the lore master told me. No, I'm just...
he's further down the interview, damn it. Let's... All right, sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah, he was hatched in Blackmarsh, part of a tribe that had suffered a lot at the hands of House Drez. And they were pretty much on their last leg when Drez came in and took almost everyone. Utek his name was Sazin at the time. He was young, and I think he had only just had his naming day. Or maybe he didn't. I don't remember. Either way, he was young, and he got taken to Morrowind. He was a slave for many, many years. And when the Ebonheart Pact was signed, he was freed, obviously. A lot of his people, like a lot of Argonians did, wanted to kind of just stay in Morrowind because it was too hard to make it all the way to Blackmarsh. That's where you get like Balfoy and stuff like that. He kind of had a vision and kind of decided that the Hist was calling him home, but first he was going to get revenge on their slavers. And so there were some Ashlanders that had been having their ancestral graves dug up for a Quama mine by the same Dunmer who had enslaved the Baneskill tribe. And so, long story short, in an unlikely series of events, these small group of Argonians managed to convince the Ashlanders to attack the slavers. They would kind of do like a pincer movement, killed the slavers, returned home. Utek started learning about his people, or Sazin started learning about his people, went into the depths of Blackmarsh, and came back as Utek Jaw with a holy mission to bring his tribe back and to protect the tribal people from the civilized people like the Dunmer who enslaved them. And that's kind of his backstory, and also the Banescale Fellowship's backstory.
See, if I were to draw a real life parallel here, he does kind of sound like a Native American. In a way.
Yeah, definitely, and that's probably some influence, because I did loosely base the Banescale Fellowship story off of the Bane Paw Fellowship story, and obviously Tauren are, heavily influenced by the Native Americans, but that whole like tribal displacement and like wanting to have your independence and stuff, I could definitely see that.
How deep of a scar did slavery leave on Utek?
I mean, it depends on how much I can cuss. It was bad,
Please don't restrain yourself. Give it to me.
Severely fucked him up, and he remained fucked up for his whole life. It's kind of why he was always a little crazy and creepy and unstable. And as I roleplayed him, and as time went on, he got less and less personable. He got more and more distant and he would literally just like be in the middle of something and wander off into the marsh, and no one would see him for like 10 days. And I would have to play my NPCs to be able
I was going to say, like, that sounds a little difficult to roleplay the more he distances himself, the less chance you have for social
Yeah,
interactions.
and my other two characters that I played were both like other Bane scales, one of whom was in slavery with Utekjaw, and was his egg brother. And that's kind of the way that I approached the Bane Scale Fellowship from the beginning. Was Utekjaw is not my character, Above is not my character. They are characters of they're NPCs in my plotline.
But as time went on, you got invested.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I knew that I would get invested, and I wasn't avoiding that by any means.
Right.
But even, then, like, a lot of times I wouldn't play Utekjaw very much, and he didn't do cool things too often. He was old and he was messed up physically from slavery, and so he was not very useful. If we were going to go like fight something, I would bring in a different NPC.
Moving on to the Bane Scale Fellowship, then, what prompted you to start it?
I really loved Argonians, and I really wanted to see somebody do them right. And so I was determined to be that person, I guess. And I also really loved Ashlanders, and so that's how I kind of tried to make it more of like I guess I really like tribal roleplay. I'm super into my Celtic ancestry, and all of that stuff, and so tribal roleplay does a lot for me. So I think that was really, even more than the Argonian thing, that was the motivation behind Bane Scale.
So give me, excluding the big ending, give me a significant event that influenced Utekjaw. Like, what if you had to point to a singular event that gave him the most character growth? What would it be, and why?
That's a good question.
Because I want to make you think.
I would say there was a guild that was around. Oh gosh, I can't remember their name right now. I'm sorry, Nick Transu. I cannot remember their name, but they were a really, really great guild, and they were like kind of the closest ally to the Bane Scale. And we met them on our journey up to Skyrim, and they were kind of insular, and then decided to start getting more involved in the rest of the community, and we were kind of their first involvement. And from then on out, our two guilds were kind of inseparable. It was really cool to have that bond. And I'm just kicking myself that I can't remember their name. But in any case, they at one point they came down to Blackmarsh, and Utekjaw hadn't gone on the journey to Skyrim because he couldn't. He was physically unable to travel that far. And so they came down, and they kind of were looking forward to meeting Utek, and they all came into the hut, and we had like along the way, the leader of this guild was telling everybody like, oh yeah, this is a seer, a powerful shaman. And so he was like kind of getting hyped up. And so I asked for some OOC information, just a little bit about each character. And then Utek came up to them and waved his fingers in their faces, and used his vision to basically say what he knew about each of them, like, oh, you are a sturdy branch in a storm or whatever. And he gave them each names, Argonian names. And it was, pretty spontaneous, and it was the moment where I was like, okay, this is the character that I wanted to have. But what influenced him from that moment, I think, in an in-character way, was kind of seeing that he had gained a reputation, and seeing that he could unite people. And kind of his secret was that he was trying to unite all of these tribes, so that he could essentially bring them all under the patronage of a rogue hist that he followed. And so for him, it was like, okay, I can get more than just Argonians. I can get everybody to come and follow me.
That bastard! No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, he's dastardly.
So, Seeley, when you realized that your character was looked at in such a way, how did that make you think?
I mean, it felt good. I mean, it was nice, you know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I'm waiting for you.
I mean, it was cool. It was exciting, and it made me feel good about the character.
Okay. So a bit of ego stroking is what you're saying. Well, that's all
Yeah, definitely.
right.
I mean, I won't lie.
No, I'm being stupid. I'm joking. But okay. Let me ask this. Let's switch up a little bit. So you were going with the Bane scales, and eventually you come across this plot called Tales of the Second Era. What was that about? Tell us about it. How'd you get involved?
So that was started by the Morrowind community. And they kind of approached me early on and said, "Hey, you do Ashlander stuff. Would you be willing to, run the Ashlander side of this like Housemer versus Ashlander plot that we want to do?"
And it's known to them as the Ashlander War.
Yes,
Is that right?
to this day.
To this day, it's been talked about with great affection, which is only a testament to, I would imagine, how well Mr. Floyd has played his characters.
Well,
So,
I mean, there were a lot of people pushing that thing forward, so I can't take too much credit because all I did.
Well, too bad you will. No, I'm kidding. But all right, let's get into the nitty gritty though. What was the premise of that? What was going on?
So, in lore, it says, and this is, I think, where the idea came from. It says that throughout Morrowind's history, there have been many false Nerevarines that have come up, which is, the Dunmer Jesus. So the idea was that there was going to be a false Nerevarine, and a tribe of Ashlanders would believe that the Nerevarine had come again. So I ran that group of Ashlanders, which I tied into the Banescale plot because it was the same group of Ashlanders who helped Utek Jah kill his slave master back in the day. So they had some ties to the Banescale, which allowed me to kind of integrate my guild a little bit. But long story short, we got a bunch of people to play Ashlander alts, and most of them died, and some of them are still around to this day. Evoba, who is really well known in the Morrowind community, was super involved in that plot and ended up kind of taking over the Ashlander side of things, which was great.
What was the whole plotting? Well, how did plotting go? I imagine you guys had like a Discord channel, or if there was Discord back then, or
it was TeamSpeak, yeah, back in TeamSpeak. But so I know that the people that were running them, like the Housemer side of things, it was their plot line, and so they kind of had like certain points that they wanted to reach, and we just did a role play in between those, and then when those came up, we would do those. And for my side of it, mostly we just did a whole lot of Ashlander roleplay, which was a blast. I mean, and what happened in character was that progressively the Ashlanders got more and more aggressive as they were kind of like a cornered animal. They were afraid that the Housemer were going to kill them because they had this Nerevarine, but they also thought the Nerevarine was going to save them from the Housemer, and so it was kind of one of those situations where conflict was inevitable, and it just progressed and progressed until it was an all-out war.
So tell us about the war exactly, because I've heard some stories, and many a fond memory about the war. Particularly a one-on-one fight with a certain Relis, I think his name was.
Ramus, yeah.
Ramus, excuse me.
That was when that was when he died, which was super cool. He fought the Nerevarine in hand-to-hand combat on Ash Mountain, which was such a cool battle. I think it was like a 2-day battle, and it was just basically an uphill battle on an erupting mountain with all of the Ashlanders basically slowly being pushed up to the top of the mountain and then just being slaughtered. My character
those poor guys.
Yeah, it was so tragic and cool. My character got his head smashed in by Sarthos.
Now this makes me wonder, like, how did you guys conduct the battles as they were going on? Because with that many people, from what I'm imagining, with that many people and all that chat spam, holy crap.
Yeah, it was definitely holy crap. There had been somewhat of a precursor to this when I started the Battle of Canarthy's Roost, which was a giant battle between EP and AD. Kind of the way that we figured out to start doing these battles is to have certain things that are. Canarthy's Roost was a little more freeform, but with Morrowind, there were certain things that were kind of like destined to happen. And then the role play in between there could sway them slightly one way or the other. But for the most part, it was somewhat predetermined, but the role play itself was very free form. Like if somebody pushed through, then they pushed through, you know.
Mhm.
And some people didn't like how planned it was, and some people didn't like that it was like, uh, NPCs dying and then running away and coming back as a different NPC or whatever. But there's just the limitations of how many people you have.
You can't please them all.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it was so some people weren't super stoked about the pre-plannedness of the events, but personally, it didn't bother me. I thought it was really fun, and I think that in some ways, you kind of have to do that. For a one-shot battle like Canarthy's Roost, whoever wins, and the role play just let that happen. But for a giant plot line, you do have an ending in mind, and it may be able to change a little bit this way or that way, but there's really no other way to organize that many people, especially when people just aren't going to listen, which happens.
Well, that's kind of the key word, isn't it? Organization. And when it comes to large scale plots, I think you and I can agree here that it's like herding a bunch of cats that are on like crystal meth or some shit. It's just nuts. So moving on from the Ashlander War, from Tales of the Second Era Morrowind, we move to Skyrim. How did that come to you?
I really like playing bad guys. I really like Reachmen, and I wanted to kind of one of the end goals with it was to have more Reachmen role players join the Banescale Fellowship, because we had Ashlanders, we had Argonians, we had random other like a Wood Elf or two.
So hang on a second. So what you're telling me is that this was one giant recruitment campaign.
Yeah.
Because man, no, I'm kidding. So you wanted to spur more Reachmen RPers. That's a noble cause, because they are sadly, in my opinion, under our roleplayed now, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. They're definitely under roleplayed. And they're so cool. And I think that one of my other main motivations was just enjoying running these big plot lines. I kind of had a taste with it with Morrowind, and I wanted to have my own, that I had a little more creative control of. And I just knew so many great role players in Skyrim. It was just kind of natural.
This was back during the days of Children of Skyrim now, wasn't it?
Yeah, Children of Skyrim was very young at the time, actually. It was brand spanking new, and I worked really closely with all of them, and they all made incredible contributions to it. And it really couldn't have happened without how well organized and how together the community was at the time, because everybody was just stoked about Skyrim.
What was the premise of Skyrim exactly?
So there was a worm cult bad guy, an Imperial named Aulus Salar. He's kind of your typical suave bad guy. I think another big motivation was having the worm cult be the villain in roleplay, because they're supposed to be the villain in the story, so why don't we roleplay that enough?
All right. And as a happy consequence, I would say, and this comes from listening to the Roleplay podcast, some folks actually kept their worm cult characters now, didn't they?
A couple people kept their Reachmen, and it was all I actually was just talking to my buddy Art the Lizard the other day, and he plays, a really big bad guy in Skyrim. His character still references Aulus Salar, apparently, so there's all kinds of cool stuff that is still happening because of that plot.
Mr. Art also conducted a plot for himself, didn't he? The Goblin Stone, I think it was called.
Yeah, that was not too long ago. That's part of his very large plot the Morthus, which is all kinds of like Lovecraftian goodness and intricacy.
So, how did it all end? How did Skyrim come to a close?
Well, the idea behind it was that Aulus Salar was going to try to steal the voice from the Greybeards, which obviously wouldn't be good in the hands of the Empire. And we talked a lot about what that would actually look like if the Worm Cult did win, because we had it kind of open-ended based on how the battles were going to go and how the final battle went. If they would, make it to High Hrothgar or not. And they didn't, but the idea was that, okay, well, maybe he would get up there and he would like steal some books and maybe like kill a Greybeard or something and then flee. And then it would, be left open. Well, what's he going to learn from these books that he stole from High Hrothgar? So I guess it was never possible for him to actually steal the voice because nobody's going to face off, up against the Greybeards, especially because they have a dragon up there, which obviously nobody knows. But the final battle was, I think it was either a 2 or a 3-day event, and I had so much fun with it, and I think other people did too. Alscotter had a one-on-one duel with Aulus Salar, and he kicked his ass. And Salar went into mist form and then fled up to High Hrothgar. And all the Reachmen started rushing up the mountain, and the Nords and the Pact came and stopped them. And there was a big old bloody battle on the slopes to the throat of the world. And a lot of the Reachmen who had been kind of... we did lots of preliminary roleplay with these Reachmen. We had like a forum roleplay and a map of their town and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of them were kind of forced into joining the Worm Cult because they were isolationists and they weren't interested. But Salar, manipulated them and forced them to fight for him. And so some of them actually, near the end, betrayed him and went to the Children of Sky, the Council of Skyrim, and basically pled for amnesty in order to fight against Salar. And so some of them fought alongside the Nords. So it was really interesting, and we had a lot of fun.
You're a big fan of these grandiose battles, aren't you? Especially one-on-one fights as well. I'm starting to notice a trend here.
Well, I didn't plan either of those actually. They were other people's ideas, but they were cool.
Okay, so we reached the finale, I would say, of Tales of the Second Era, where you moved it to Black Marsh. And I would venture to say that this seems a little more personal to you now, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because...
I mean, for me, it was what I had been waiting for since before the game came out.
You must have been salivating. You must have been like, "Oh, God, let's do this! I'm ready, excited."
Oh,
and then once it started, you were like, "Fuck, I can't deal with these people."
Yeah, pretty much. It was like months of stressing and being excited, and then months of being like, oh man, I should never have done this. This is way too much work. I'm going crazy. But it was so, so worth it in the end. I still look back on it very, very fondly. And I felt like I took everything I learned from helping the Morrowind community and from getting involved in the Skyrim community. And it wasn't, as far as like in number of people involved, it paled in comparison, I would say. But it didn't matter because for me, it was the perfect Argonian story. And I think everyone that was involved got at least something out of it. And I know a lot of people enjoyed it a lot.
So walk us through this perfect Argonian story.
Well, it all started with the idea of a rogue hist. It's something that we have heard about in lore, but we haven't seen very much of. It evolved beyond that, but basically, I mentioned that after Sa-Zin returned to Blackmarsh, he disappeared into the depths of the marsh and came back as Utek Jah. Well, what happened was he disappeared into the very, very deepest parts of Blackmarsh, where he came across a cult of Argonians who had existed within the Banescale tribe and had been calling to him psychically through the Hist. and they worshipped a kind of a weird, twisted proto-Argonian hist tree creature. There's suggestions in lore that Argonians were once like part tree people. It's not confirmed, but I took that idea and I ran with it and created this character essentially who is like a proto-Argonian that is still around.
He's still around.
Yeah, he's like a
You heard it here, folks. The big bad guy is still around.
Yeah, it's still around to this day, and he's been around for a very, very long time. And he's kind of the real bad guy behind Utek-Jah and this cult. And it's very complicated, which it was meant to be because the Hist is very complicated, and that's why I think most people who like Argonians like the Hist so much. But essentially, there have been hints in lore that it's possible for non-Argonians to join the psychic connection of the Hist. And so my idea was that the Hist had to evolve to make this happen. That the Hist is wanting to spread its influence and include more people in its big psychic web that holds it and the Argonians together. And so the idea is that this ancient proto-Argonian is kind of a tool. He hates the Hist. He feels betrayed by the Hist because he was a prototype, and was kind of like tossed to the side afterwards. He felt like he had just served his purpose and had no reason to exist now. And so he was like, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to create my own Hist and have a separate psychic web of my own and have different histories that aren't related to these other ones. But unbeknownst to him, the Hist wanted that to happen. And the Hist allowed him to create these new Hist trees that were kind of creepy and were different. And through Utek-Jah and his other servants, during this plot line, they started corrupting histories and tricking people into drinking the sap from these corrupted histories, which would essentially influence their minds to join this proto-Argonian.
I gotta say, a lot of it seems like you're treading grounds that weren't really offered in lore, if that makes sense. The way that I look at it, like, there are two types of people who look at the lore. You have the strict constructionists and the loose constructionists, right? If it's not in the lore, we're not going to do it, right? Whereas the loose constructionists say, it's in the lore provides context, and we can have lightsabers. We'll just say it's magic. So, was that ever a concern, as you were moving forward? Were you ever looking back like, okay, this seems to make sense, that sort of thing? Did that ever occur?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wanted it to be very based in lore, but I think pretty much everything I have done could be looked at by a strict lore person as wrong. I mean, it does not say in lore for sure there are proto-Argonians. So for some people that means don't roleplay it. There's no precedent at all for Reachmen getting along with Argonians, but it makes sense to me, and I felt like certain context it can work. And I'm a student of history. I love history.
You said the magic words. All right. Well, we're going to be talking about history after this. I'm sorry, please continue.
Yeah, a lot of history shows that things are not black and white and that everything is mutable. And I think for me, the way that I enjoy role-playing the most is by taking lore and using that as your guideline and as your fence. You don't cross the fence, but if you want to, you can do different things within the fence. You can move the fence out a little bit, or you can put your toe on the other side a little bit, but you always stay firmly based in that. And I think that allows for more creativity and more creative writing, which in my opinion is the real meat and potatoes of roleplay.
It kind of sounds like, and this is what I'm reading from you, but a certain level of flexibility is needed when it comes to RP.
Absolutely.
So, moving on then, how did Black Marsh end? What happened to these rogue trees? What happened, more importantly, to Utek-Jah?
Well, so the idea was that Utek-Jah had when he went into Black Marsh and stopped being Zazen and became Utek-Ja, the cult took his soul and split it in two. And they used half of his soul to make the ritual that created the new Hist, these corrupted, mutated histories. And the other half of his soul is kept away in a gem in his staff. And that's kind of what keeps him going. So his old apprentice, Jalen Kai, who was a member of the Banescale Fellowship, managed with everybody else's help to get his staff and get the crystal out of it. Meanwhile, the Savekliel, which was the name of this cult, these followers of these rogue histories, the Savekliel managed to steal the Nimic egg from Skyrim, which, for those who don't know, the Nimic egg is an Argonian artifact that is said to connect the consciousness of all of the histories together. And so the plan was for the Savekliel to do their ritual to the Nimic egg, thus immediately turning all Hist and all beings connected to the Hist into the new Hist. And now Utek-Ja knew that that wasn't exactly what was going to happen. And he knew this the whole time, and this is kind of where he goes from being a bad guy to being misunderstood. He was seen as being a traitor for, harming a history, but he knew that the Hist's plan was to increase its own power, to give it the ability to include more than just Argonians in the psychic link, and to just make it more powerful in general. So he kind of allowed his staff to get captured. He trained Jalen Kai for like 2 years, in real life, 2 years, and never told him that this was going to happen, but kind of got him ready to do this. And so
did Jalen Kai's player know of this?
No, he did not until the plotline was starting, and I talked to him about it out of character. But for years, nobody knew out of character what was going on behind the scenes.
So that was a real kick in the balls, I would imagine.
I mean, they loved it, It was it was certainly, like, I think the best roleplay plots do make you emotional and sometimes upset. And so I do think people were a little bit upset, not because they felt betrayed by me, but because they felt betrayed by Utek-Ja, which they kind of were. So Jalen Kai, during this big kind of final battle, Utek-Ja was doing the ritual to the Nimic egg, and Jalen Kai came up behind him and stabbed him in the back with the other half of his soul. He completed the ritual, fell onto the Nimic egg, and bled out onto it. Now, the ritual that he did contains the other half of his soul. It is now his soul is a ritual. So that ritual was completed on the Nimic egg, and then his other part of his soul stabbed into him with the shard covered in his blood, mixed with the Nimic egg, fusing those two parts of the soul together, and thus fusing the old Hist and the new Hist into one. So essentially, the two webs became the same. Kind of what the Savekliel wanted, except all of the weird mind influency stuff went away. And so everybody who had licked the corrupted Hist sap, I told them, now if you want to, you can roleplay being connected to the Hist. And the idea is now the Hist is more powerful, and it spoke out in a booming voice and said, good job, everybody. This was hard. This was bloody. This was rough, but that's life. And now through this trial of blood, you are all stronger, and so are we.
I can only imagine the sort of epicness that feeling brought.
I hope
as they
so.
saw at the conclusion, because in all honesty, it does sound epic.
I
because
hope it was.
You have two metaphysical halves being reunited. You have corruption being wiped away and replaced with something stronger. You have the final climax in which apprentice kills master.
Totally.
That's the makings for a good story, my friend, I've got to say.
Well, thank
but
you.
let me ask... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think some people didn't get it. It was very complicated, and you kind of had to be there for a lot of it to know what was going on. And so I think some people were like, what? Oh, I guess it's over. You know? But for the people who did get it, I think they enjoyed it. And for me personally, it was the most fulfilling roleplay experience I've ever had. So,
So let me ask you this as a final question on the subject. Does anyone know of Utek's Jaw's sacrifice? Because it does sound like a sacrifice to me.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't know at first, but as time went on, he started to realize what was going on, and it was a sacrifice. And for him, it was everything he could have ever wanted. I mean, he finally did what he was made to do, as far as he was concerned. He finally served the Hist in the final way that he was meant to serve it, and all those years in slavery, it turns out, were intentional on the part of the Hist. And I think some people realized it, but I think to this day, in character and to some degree out of character, a lot of people still think that he was just a bad guy and a madman, and thank goodness we stopped this terrible thing from happening. And they don't realize, oh, actually, the terrible thing that was happening was a good thing, and it was meant to happen. And to me, that's actually kind of cool, because the Argonians are so enigmatic and mysterious that, of course, something like this would be confusing and not everybody would get it.
This, I can draw a parallel to this. Have you ever played Metal Gear Solid 3?
I have not.
Okay. The main antagonist does something similar, in which they sacrifice themselves for a greater goal. And you, the protagonist, play as her apprentice, which you are tasked with defeating her. And as it turns out, the antagonist gave the protagonist all the weapons he needed to take her out in order to see this objective through.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So, last question. I know I said it before, but this is my last question because I want to get inside your head here. Go back in time with me. What were your feelings once you hit that enter key? Once it was all over? How were you feeling? What was going through your mind?
Immediate relief.
Okay.
It was all in all, I would say, including like the year before the game came out, it was like a 3-year project. I had it in mind in one form or another that whole time, and it felt complete. It felt like an ending. And after that, there was a little epilogue event, mostly with Banescale people and some other friends, where my NPCs kind of said goodbye and went off to go do their little Argonian thing, and it's so much relief. I mean, I felt complete. It was a completion, and that's why I always tell people, don't be afraid to end your roleplay. Just make it really good when you do, And it was the best feeling in the world. I was completely happy.
Okay, and I'm happy that you're happy, as for whatever that's worth, because RP was always about having fun, and you got what you wanted. So I'm happy for you, dude.
Well, thank you. Of course, and this may segue into what you might want to talk about next, but it was stressful, and all of these were stressful, and all the other events I did were stressful too. To run events, it seems like, oh, you're just role-playing, but there's a lot to it that is not fun.
So, yes, and it does segue, so thank you for that. Let's talk about this. All right, I'll just come out and say it. The toxicity in the RP community, it's there, whether we like it or not. It affects us in many ways, whether we like it or not. And when you try to organize public plots, you're essentially in the sniper scope now, aren't you? How did you cope with that? Because that stuff, I can imagine, wears at your psyche. You can't please them all. You're suffering from criticisms from all sides of the spectrum. Some you got to get into, I imagine, sometimes heated debates with your fellow organizers over how to proceed. What did you do, Floyd?
Yeah, I mean, I had somebody for a completely different plot line. I was playing an NPC who was like an elder Argonian who was supposed to be an authority figure in Stormhold, specifically for the purposes of like being a judge for an event. and somebody reamed me for it. Like somebody I didn't even know. They messaged me and they're like, I had so much respect for you and I loved Scrollplay, and now I can't believe that I ever looked up to you, and you're terrible for playing.
Jeez, that's disheartening.
Oh man, it I was pissed off. I was sad. I felt betrayed. It was like, man, I'm just doing my thing, and this is how I think a lot of organizers feel: is I am making a plot, and you are welcome to join it or not. And if you do, that's great. I want people to have fun. If you don't like it, stay the hell away.
Yeah, for sure. So does it ever get to you though when you look at the RP community? So what do you do? I mean,
well, I think the best thing that you can do is take a bit of a break. I took a long break between Skyrim and Blackmarsh. I actually, not long after the Skyrim plotline, I handed over leadership of the guild to Malfunction. He ran it for a time, and then when he was ready, he handed it over to somebody else, and it's in somebody else's hands now. And I think that a lot of us, and I mean, I guess I want to use this opportunity to speak directly to the people who do organize events. Take time for yourselves. Like, this is not your job. You have a lot of people that rely on you, yes, but they don't have to. They're people that are self-sufficient, and if they aren't going to make their own roleplay happen, then that's their own fault. You can't be there all the time, and you shouldn't, because it affects you and it makes you worse at what you do. Take a break. Put responsibility in the people around you that you trust, which you have to have those. And, don't think that you have to do everything. And if you need to take a break for 4 months, if you need to take a break for 2 days, it doesn't matter. Take a break. It's necessary. You have to get outside of the headspace, because it will start to bog you down, and you'll start making decisions that you regret, and you'll start getting caught up in the drama. I got caught up in drama, and I had a nasty, it was like 4 or 5 messages on a public forum with somebody, and afterwards I just felt like shit, and I look back at it now and I'm still ashamed that I fed into the drama instead of just saying, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way, and then not talking to that person anymore.
Okay. You heard it here, folks, from the wise Argonian himself. Make time for yourself. Step back. So, with all these plots out of the way, after feeling that surge of relief, after dealing with all the bullshit, you went off and did other projects, didn't you? One of them being RPHQ. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, RPHQ, I'm still working on it.
Tirelessly, I will. Tirelessly. Folks, you can see his latest video, which is from the Crow's Nest on RPHQ.
Yes, indeed.
Or you can look up Roleplay Headquarters on YouTube. Sorry, Floyd. The rest of this card here says no other line, so we'll have to get back into it.
Yeah, so, I mean, the skinny of it is that RPHQ is supposed to be a site where you can go and get links to useful roleplay things, like roleplay communities, roleplay networking options, roleplay resources, tools, inspiration, stuff just to watch that's related to roleplay or listen to that's related to roleplay. And we have a Discord and a forum and all of that stuff. And a Facebook group too, which doesn't have enough people on it, so don't be ashamed. Go publicly like it. I have had very ambitious ideas for it in the past. Right now, all I want it to be is just a useful site for role players. In the future, it could become more, but it all just depends on if we can get funding or not. But essentially, yeah, it's just trying to be something that role players can go to and get something out of.
You have a lot of resources on RPHQ. Everything from videos about what is roleplay to shadow roleplay, or even things like for stuff of tabletop and pen and paper. And you're even trying to stretch into, I think it was cosplay, was it? Or something of that nature? LARP, excuse me.
Yeah. We have 0 LARP resources and 0 LARP communities listed right now, and the LARP forum is completely empty. Because I think, a lot of LARP stuff happens obviously in real life, so it doesn't necessarily need as much internet support. But if anybody is out there who likes LARP, we're super down to get some stuff for you if you can help us.
What other projects have you done besides RPHQ? I imagine that's your big baby, isn't it? Right? That's you're pouring your heart and soul into it. I can see it. Anybody can see it. But you've also done other things as well.
Yeah, we did the Rock and Roleplay podcast for a while, which was a lot of fun. Varland, who some folks may remember some of his amazing plot lines. He was really involved in Malfunction, who you guys might remember as the Lizard Wizard. He's involved. Dinah, who's from the early days of pre-ESO, super involved in AD. Yeah, we did that show for a little bit. It was music and tabletop style roleplay. And then also, I am currently working on Let's Roleplay in ESO, which I have a few videos of. Some of them are really old, but essentially I'm going to record the entire first season and then edit it and then release them on a regular basis so that you guys get a nice solid chunk for like a good while of stuff to watch.
Give us a little bit of spoilers because I'm a spoiler hungry Nazi. So, what do you have planned for Let's RP and ESO? Where are you planning to go with it?
I'm super stoked for it. The idea behind this first season, and if it goes beyond that, it'll change a little bit. But the idea for the first season is basically watching somebody who nobody knows jump into the roleplay community and see what happens. I'm going to be on an account. Nobody will know who I am. I'm on a character that nobody has heard of and knows nothing about, and I'm going to just roleplay. And I have some ideas of like maybe a personal plot line, but mostly what I'm going to do is get involved in other plot lines and try to make it as organic and fluid and unplanned and icy as possible, essentially. It should be really fun. I'm having a blast with it already.
I'm glad you're having fun because that sounds like a nightmare. Oh boy, I'll be praying for you, dog. Well, that brings me to my last question before we close this interview off. So let me ask you this. Looking back on your journey, looking back at everything you've done, from your forum days to WoW to ESO to the projects you've got going on now to how much you've contributed. As a general question as this is, how do you feel about all that? What do you think to yourself when you look back and see all this being done, with all this that has been done, actually? Let me ask you that.
That's a good question. A lot of times it's hard to see the forest through the trees. I look at all the stuff I have to do and all the stuff that I want to do, and I just think, man, there's so much left undone, which, if I can get myself in the right mindset, that's great, because it means that I'm not nearly done yet, and I can keep working on all of this stuff for years, which I plan to. But talking about it with you, even just this last hour or so, it makes me feel really good. I feel like I've done something important, and I know that's kind of weird to say that word when you're talking about roleplay, but for me, storytelling is really important, and I have learned a lot, and I have become a much stronger, and I've become a better storyteller due to all of this, and I have met people that I will always be in contact with. I mean, I went and I met Malfunction in real life this summer. I plan on meeting more people in real life. I actually might meet Vec, and I'm always down for that, and I love it. But even arguably more important than meeting cool people that I truly love, I feel like we are in a time right now where the roleplay that we're doing is unprecedented. The MMO roleplay scene over the last 15 to 20 years is the newest form of storytelling. It is the most modern way to tell stories. And that's, I think, part of the reason why we have so many problems sometimes. There's no ground rules,
Yeah,
We're just flying by the seat of our fucking pants.
for sure. I mean, it's like there are no rules when you think about it.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's all etiquette, isn't it?
Totally.
It's not, you know, there's nothing concrete. It's basically what's accepted and what isn't. With
Absolutely.
of course. Which leads me to another question. I want to let you go, dude. I know you got to go, but I can't help but ask this question. If you were able to look at your younger self, knowing, you know, the stuff that you got into now and all the RP that you did, what sort of nugget of advice, what would you say to yourself, your younger self, as he was going forward?
Immediately what comes to mind when you say that is me being in middle school, sitting on my computer in my bedroom late at night, doing Tauren roleplay. Just everybody telling me that I'm wasting my time and that I need to go do other things. And to a degree, yes, I probably could have gone outside more when I was in middle school. I think what I would tell myself is what you're doing matters. It's not the only thing that matters, and keep that in mind. But what you're doing matters, and don't feel like storytelling is a waste of time, no matter what kind of story you're telling, no matter what way you're telling it. And also remember that the best stories come from experience. So
the best stories come from experience.
Go have experiences and then tell stories about them.
Thank you, Floyd, so much for obliging me with the first episode. I'd like to close this interview off with 10 questions, the Pivo questionnaire, as it was called, hosted on a French series called Bouillon de Culture. I probably butchered the French there, but sorry. Then used by James Lipton inside the Actors Studio, and now I'll be using them here for each episode. 10 questions, Floyd. You're almost there. Number 1. What is your favorite word?
Tumultuous.
What is your least favorite word?
Brang? Can I use that?
Okay, bring.
I brang it.
Oh God, no, please. You're talking to an English major, dude. That's all right. Let's brang on the next question. What turns you on?
Besides you? Esotericism.
Esotericism. What turns you off?
Rigidness.
Rigidness. What noise do you love?
This is so stereotypical, but I really like to hear birds chirping.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Nagging?
What is your favorite curse word?
No,
Sorry.
let me change that. The texting sound that my phone makes.
What is your favorite curse word?
Shite.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt if given the chance?
Quest writer.
What profession would you absolutely never want to do?
President.
If heaven exists, if it does, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Go do whatever the fuck you want, kid.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 1 of ESO Spotlight. Thank you, Floyd, for coming down. Thank you, listener, my audience, for listening. And as always, I'll see you in the next episode.